Hello everyone. In this part of presentation, we will discuss about the mechanisms of innate immunity. There are different mechanisms that already we have seen in the previous videos, and how these different mechanisms are executed when you have an infection, and that is what we are going to discuss in this presentation. So these are the different levels of innate immune resistance or different strategies of innate immune resistance. There are resistance developed by the body as an anatomical strategy, and there are physiological mechanisms. There are phagocytosis, inflammation, and additionally there are cellular responses like natural killer cells, and also the normal flora. All these things collectively work in order to resist a foreign substance or resist the attack by the foreign substance to the body. And this table comprises various mechanisms like anatomical barriers, in which you have skin, mucous membrane, then physiological barriers under which you have the body temperature, pH, and other chemical mediators of the body. Then phagocytosis as a mechanism in which certain cells are involved. Then also inflammation. This phagocytosis and inflammation are very tightly related mechanisms for providing resistance. So we'll see one by one. First, we'll discuss especially about the anatomical barriers. Right. So the anatomical barriers are nothing but the defense developed by the body as a structural barrier. Right. As a structural part, there are certain defense strategies developed or naturally present in the body. We know that the human body, our body is exposed to the environment in both ways. That means in the exterior surface and also on the interior surface. And we know that human body is like a cavity. It has a cavity. That means there is an internal wall and an external wall, and both these walls are exposed to the environment. There is an internal environment, or there is an internal covering, and this covering is exposed to the environment, just like the intestinal cavity. And the other one, the external one, the external surface of our body is also exposed to the environment. So both the sides, both these exposed areas to be protected, and this is done by an anatomical barrier. Right. It's like a physical blockage of the body against the invading microorganisms. So there are two major anatomical barriers that prevent entry of pathogens to the host body. One is the skin, which is providing protection at the external surface of the body, and the mucous membrane is the second one, which provide a protection in the internal surface of the body. Usually these mucous membranes are present in almost all the organ systems like the respiratory system, alimentary cavity, genitourinary system, and the conjunctiva. All these are exposed internal sites. Then let's see about the skin. When we talk about the anatomy of the skin has two basic layers. One is the outer layer, which is very thinner layer. It's technically called epidermis, and there is an inner layer which is thicker, called a dermis. Right. And the dermis in turn consists of the different components, or which provide the basic nature of the skin, which contains hair follicles, sweat gland, and sebaceous gland. And below which you have the subcutaneous layer, and through the subcutaneous layer you can see the blood vessels and all are flowing and they provide the basic protection for the skin in terms of the nutrients and other immunological cells. Right. So this is the basic structure of skin. And how skin act as a defensive structure. So there are certain points I am listed here, and we will discuss each of the point. The first thing is that the outer layer, that means the epidermis, which contain which is basically it's a tightly packed epithelial cell. The outer layer is a tightly packed epithelial layer, so that cells cannot easily penetrate this epithelial layer, right? Since they are tightly packed, there is no gap at all for the entry of microorganism. One thing. Second thing is that the outer epidermal layer also contain a layer of external layer of dead cells, right? And these dead cells are usually filled with a waterproofing protein called keratin. So the dead cells, being a layer of dead cell, is one of the important thing that microorganism usually will not attack a dead cell. And the second thing is that there is a keratin. Keratin is, since it is waterproofing material and there is no moisture available, microorganism do not prefer as a nutrient substance, right? So these things maintain helps to maintain a low moisture condition, and which is not favorable, right? And moreover, there is a mechanism called desquamation or peeling of the skin, in which the outer layer, the dead layer of the skin, is continuously shed from the skin. So even if there are certain organisms deposited during the process of desquamation, these microbes will be cleaned out, right? So in that way, the epidermis plays a role in providing a resistance. And the second point is about a dermis. The dermis, already stated, this is the inner layer and this is a thicker layer of the skin. And this is usually made up of connective tissues, and this contain the blood vessels, hair follicles, sebaceous gland and sweat gland. And each of them are important in immunological point of view. Sweat gland releases the fluid which is called, what we know, sweat, and which is having a high salt concentration, especially like NaCl. And this high salt concentration maintains an unfavorable condition for the growth of microorganism. We know that when the salt concentration is higher, there will be the osmotic balance of the organism will be lost, and that leads to cellular destruction. And the third one is about or the second point in the dermis is about sebaceous gland, which releases an oily secretion called sebum. And this sebum is antimicrobial, that it contains lactic acid and fatty acid. This maintains the pH of the skin between very low acidic pH is maintained like 3 to 5. And this very acidic pH is not favorable. We can imagine it's not favorable for the growth of normal human pathogens, since most of them are living at a normal pH of around 7, right? Then finally, about the hair, which is made up of a protein, usually a tough protein, waterproofing protein called keratin, which is not a favorable substrate for the microbes to grow. And this also provide a protection, because it is usually there is a these hair is exposed out, and they provide a kind of protection to the epidermal layer. And moreover, these hair bulb forms the base of the hair follicle, and they through this what we call the opening of the hair follicle, there is the secretion of the sebum, so that the organism cannot easily penetrate this hair follicle, right? And they provide a kind of protection. And moreover, in general sense, that these are also involved in the regulation of the body temperature. Now we'll move into the second anatomical structure, that is the mucous membrane. And this is the interior protective layer. The interior layer of the body is protected by these things, these epithelial cell lining, which is called the mucous membrane. And you can see these kind of layers in the interior layer of the nose, mouth, lungs, and all the other various internal organs. And this usually consists of an outer epithelial layer, and just like in the skin, there is an underlying connective tissue. And the very specific and significant feature of mucous membrane is that they secrete a viscous fluid called mucus. And this mucus is an antimicrobial substance, secreted by this mucous membrane, and this not only keeps the internal surface moist but also helps in entrapping the foreign substances within the mucus, and ultimately this will be secreted out. And you can see the layer of mucus secretion on the exterior surface of the epithelium layer. Right, and moreover, in addition to the secretion of the mucus by the mucous membrane, there is a supportive immune system for the mucous membrane, which is collectively called mucosal associated lymphatic tissue, or MALT. And these are nothing but immune cells are there to help the mucous membrane. Just beneath this mucus layer, there will be certain immunological cells ready to attack any foreign substance which penetrate this mucous membrane, which is called the mucosal associated lymphatic tissue. Usually B cells and T cells and various dendritic cells, all those cells will be ready to provide a protection, ready to provide assistance to the mucous membrane. And as already stated, different organ systems are there with the mucous membrane in their interior surface. These are the example. Respiratory system. In the respiratory system, especially in the not only in the lower but also in the upper layer, in the nose is a good example of resistance. There are hairs in the nose. In the nose you can see there is hair, and these hair provide a physical protection. And there is a secretion of mucus also in the mucous membrane of the interior of the nose, and that will entrap this organism, and those organisms which pass through will be trapped in the lower respiratory system. And in the lower respiratory tract, there is a mucous membrane which is covered by cilia, and these cilia will propel these organisms out, right? And if certain organisms will cover that also, that will be entrapped in the mucus, and these mucus finally will be expelled out through coughing and sneezing, right? And the second example is about digestive system. In the digestive system, there is a mucus secretion, and moreover there will be the digestive or the digestive enzymes and solutions that is very antimicrobial in nature. The urogenital system, the mucus and other secretions of this system will provide protection, and the flushing action of urine will ultimately eliminate, and the secretion of various substances will provide unfavorable condition also, especially in the vagina. There are various secretions which are highly acidic, and that's unfavorable for the growth. Then finally conjunctiva, that is the open part of the eye. Then there is this conjunctiva, usually it's moist and lubricated, and it's because of the production of these kind of body fluids, and they provide protection to the eye. There are secretion of substances like IgA and other immunological molecules, and these contain cells like macrophages and other substances, other cells involved in immune response. So conjunctiva is also it's having a mucus layer, and moreover it has cells associated. That means the malts, the associated cells are also there. So that's about the first mechanism, that means the physical or the anatomical barrier for providing an innate immune response. So hope you understood this part of discussion, and in the next part we will discuss the second mechanism. Thank you.